realized that it wasn't shots fired, I started hollering. I mean, this is just, all this happened very quick. I mean, so this is a matter of 3 seconds. I started yelling, no shots, don't fire, don't shoot. Actually, I was saying, don't shoot. And then I went to the glass, and they were there, and the rioters are there, and they're being very belligerent to some degree. And I started yelling, is it worth it? Is it worth it? You almost got killed. Is it worth it? And one of the guys said, what? And I said, you almost died. Is it worth it? And the guy stopped. And at that time, they quit beating on the door. This time, they were really shaking and beating on the door. And they quit beating on the door, and they stopped. And they didn't respond for a second. And then what we call an agitator, anytime you have those crowds like that, and people have ill intentions, there's professional agitators that can get people stirred up. I mean, you can take 5 agitators, and they can get a crowd of 1,000 plus stirred up really, really quick, especially if they know what they're doing. And what I would consider a true agitator, I would say he's probably a professional agitator. I don't know. I don't have his history. We didn't do a deep dive on who he is. But he definitely came to the front, and he started talking and started stirring. And the words he was using are key words that people use when they're trying to agitate a crowd. He had lost the crowd. Once an agitator gets the crowd going, they don't take the lead. They let the crowd take the lead. They fall back. But once they settle down, they jump back in front, and they start trying to stir everybody back up. That's why I say this guy was part of a professional agitator. He came to the front, and he started using words that, quite frankly, it keyed off on me. And I hollered at him, and I says, I'd put you down. And I said, I'd put you down. And the guy looked at me, and he says, this is our house. I said, it's our house too. He says, yeah, but this is our effing house. And I said, it's our house too, and we're not going to let you come in. At that point, things kind of went to a stalemate, and someone else hollered for something, and I went over, and the lieutenant and I were talking back and forth this time. But Sheriff Nils, he stayed right there in front of that door the whole time. Sheriff Nils, at some point, Troy Nils from Houston, he started engaging with them too. Talking to him back and forth. And he's a sheriff. I mean, he definitely knows what he's doing too. And that guy stayed put. And I don't know what I really lost track of what Tony and Ronnie at the time were doing. But at some point during that exchange, they had went around to the speaker's lobby over on the side. And we started hearing commotion there. And that same lieutenant, we were all focused on that front door. What I call the front door. Some people call it the back chamber, but it's the door that when we're in joint session that the guests walk through, or when the president of the United States is addressing, the joint session and giving the State of the Union. It's the doors he goes through. That's what I call the front doors. Some people call it the back of the chamber. But at some point, the back started happening. They started evacuating people. In the meantime, while this was all going on, they started evacuating people down those steps that I told people to go through and get out. They unlocked the chamber and started getting people through. But during this time, they evacuated the floor, but the balcony was still locked up, and we still had members in the balcony because of COVID. We were all separated, so they wanted to open the balcony. Instead of having guests up there, it was actually members that were up in the balcony. They were still locked in because the only way to get out of the balcony is you actually have to go into the hallway. In this unsecured area. Well, it's always a secured area, but in this case, it was an unsecured area because that's where the rioters were. And they started hitting the back door, which the back door by the speaker's lobby is just glass. I mean, there's a lot of glass there, and I think there's a lot of video out there that shows this unfortunate situation that took place. And the lieutenant had to post up back there. And what I mean by post up, he had to take a position. And the lieutenant, by my account, he was by himself. All the rest of us, there wasn't very many of us that was still on the floor that was trying to protect the floor. And the sergeant of arms and the Capitol Police, and they were all piled up, like I said, shorthanded, doing a phenomenal job, doing the best they could, still protecting members, was still going to put their life on the line to protect us, doing an outstanding job with the tools and the training they had. They were doing the best they could. But I looked out, I turned around, and I could see where the lieutenant was posted up, and I couldn't hear what he was saying because there's a lot of commotion. There was commotion going on in the front of us. There was commotion going on back there. But from my perspective, I could see that I felt like he was alone. And he was obviously in a position because he had to draw his weapon, and I saw him posted up with his weapon. And I could tell he was giving some kind of commands. I couldn't tell exactly what he was saying. I couldn't even tell what he was saying at all. I couldn't make it out. But you could tell he was in a little bit of a situation. And my mind started going on, if they breach that door, we're going to have to engage them really quick. And that engagement would be whatever it took to stop them. And I know I was prepared. I know the people that was with me was prepared to do whatever it took to stop them. Because it was going to.
You didn't, though, Congressman, have a weapon.
You don't always have to have a weapon to do certain things, but there's a lot of things happen in those situations, and you're going to react the way you got to react. It's kind of like the front door. If they came through that front door, we knew that was going to be a choke point, or I knew it was going to be a choke point. And the idea to slow them down when they go through that front door, what I call the front door is the back shed of the chamber, is that you pile them up right there. And if you create a dog pile, then it slows people down and allows people, it creates a chaos. And so you pile them up at that choke point, you pile them up. And that's a true choke point that you have. You have an opportunity to stop a lot of the people being able to rush in because you pile them up right there. And that's a technique that you can use. Well, and that back door by the speaker's lobby, that's not an option. That's a lot wider area. It's still a choke point, but not very big. It's not a very good one. It's pretty wide. And once they come in, they can scatter through all over the place.
Do you think that is why that, I believe you said it was the lieutenant who was posted up. Is that the person we see in the video that you referenced? Now, do you think he was posted up because of what you just described?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a gun! There's a gun!
He did not want to use lethal force at all. This guy is later in his career. I guarantee you, I don't know for a fact, but I guarantee you he's never had to pull his weapon in a manner like that before. He was the last person in the world that ever wanted to use force like that. And he wasn't wanting to do that. I know for a fact, because after it happened, he came over and he was physically and emotionally distraught. And I actually gave him a hug. And I said, "Sir, you did what you had to do." And I mean that. Unfortunately, the young lady, her family's life has changed, and it was an unfortunate situation that she lost her life and some people lost their loved ones. But the lieutenant's life has also changed too, because if it's the first time you've ever had to use lethal force, that doesn't ever leave you. And it wasn't his choice. He didn't show up to work that day to have to do that. He was doing his job, and he got put in a situation where he had to do his job because there was members still on the balcony. And if you're going to present your weapon in a manner and give commands and they still don't listen and they still approach, you don't have a choice, because either you have to, at that point, discharge your weapon in a manner of self-defense, or that weapon's going to be taken away from you. It's going to be used on you, and it's going to put all of our lives in danger too. So unfortunately, what he did, but I believe that he saved actually other people's lives along the way, because I think there would have been a lot more that would have lost their lives, because we wouldn't have had a choice but to use lethal force at that point. Mind you, there were still a lot of members in the balcony, and there was a few still left on the floor. Most had already evacuated though. And it was an unfortunate situation. This was a very dark day in American history that should have never, ever, ever happened. And all of us are to blame on this one. I mean, Republicans, Democrats, the media, the administration, all of us, because we have to learn a different way to debate. What we use as politicians and as media is little key phrases, little key things to get people aroused, to get people excited, to get people's attention. The problem is we do that so much that turns into anger. And this went too far. This is something that's been bubbling too long, and it caused a dark day on American history. It's going to be there forever. I didn't want to be there. It's an unfortunate situation. I wish I was never there, but I was, and I had to react the way that I had to react, and other people reacted the way they had to react. But immediately after what the lieutenant had to do, we still had people up top, and I saw Jason Crow, who's a congressman from Colorado. I saw him pick his head up. And Jason and I have worked out a lot together. Politically, we are on totally different islands. We don't get along when it comes to politics, but we get along personally. And Jason and I have had a lot of workouts together, because I run a workout group in the morning. He's one of them that's there quite often. And he poked his head up, and I said, Jason, get him out. I knew he had a military background. I said, Jason, get him out. And he says, the doors are locked. I said, break the door, get him out. And then there was a sergeant that was up there that was looking for keys to unlock the door. They got him some keys. They started unlocking, in my opinion, the wrong door, because they were going to go out the door that was going to lead them right down to where the rioters were. And I said, no, they're wrong. Other door, go out this door. And so they unlocked the door. They went out and they evacuated. And as soon as they got out, then the rest of us left the floor. And then I went to the triage center, which I haven't seen a thing like that since, stuff you see overseas. And I started realizing actually the restraint even more so what our Capitol Police did. Now, I keep this in mind. They had two options. They could be passive or use lethal force. They didn't have weapons to be less lethal. Pepper spray is not less lethal. Pepper spray may settle down one person. Pepper spray is not designed to stop a rioting crowd. It doesn't work that way. But they didn't have less lethal weapons when it comes to rubber bullets or to bean bags that they could shoot, to put out warning shots basically for them to stop before they escalated to the lethal. They could have used less lethal, then have to use that. They either had to be passive and use little bite guards to try keeping them from going through, taking hits to the face, or they had to escalate it to actual lethal force. And when they decide to pull the weapon, then you have to use it. You don't have a choice, like that lieutenant. You don't have a choice. And the lieutenant had to do what he had to do because he had to protect us. But when I went down the triage center, I saw at least 50 guys, and I shook all their hands and I thanked them for what they were doing. I went down there before I went to the lockup room where everybody was at, just to check on them. I went to the triage center first. I'd lock up, and I don't say lockup area. It was a holding area. No one was locked in the room. Members at the Ways and Means, you could come and go if you want to. The media said they were locked in there. That's actually not true. You could come and go as you want. But before I went there, I went and checked on all the Capitol Police, and man, I saw 50 guys at least. Shook their hands. Guys meaning men and women, from the DC Police to Sergeant Barnes to the Capitol Police. Uniformed and non-uniformed officers that were, broken noses, busted up faces, broken arms, busted heads. I saw one guy with his eye completely gouged out, literally, and they were trying to evacuate him, but he couldn't because they couldn't get medical services in there to get him to where he needed to go. Luckily, his eye was saved, but he's going to lose some vision in it. I saw guys that were hyperventilating. I saw guys that had got hit with pepper spray. And I thought, you just think about this. They showed so much restraint because they weren't afraid to put themselves their body in harm's way. They weren't cowards. They stood the line, took a beating, and they showed so much restraint that they could have killed that individual. They're attacking a police officer. Any place, if you got in a fight on the side of the street with an officer, that officer has every opportunity to use lethal force at that point because his life's in danger. Their lives were in danger, and they could have easily used lethal force if they wanted to, but they had great restraint because they were probably at all too that these are American citizens, and do I really want to escalate it that far? But they had to calculate this by themselves, and they didn't. If it was any other country, this was any other place in the world, and that would have happened to a government building, there would have been countless people that would have lost their lives. But these officers were willing to show enough restraint that they were putting their actual body in harm's way when they had a firearm on their side and didn't decide to use it. I think they are absolutely heroes. I don't know if I could have done that. I honestly don't know if I would have been able to do that, but they did. And not just a few of them, but a lot of them did. And it's remarkable to me that unfortunately only one person lost their lives by a gunshot. And it's unfortunate. I will say it's unfortunate. But it could have been so much worse.